we're going to bring up Dan, Everett, and Neil to talk about their work with Amparo on the Latin American poverty team. Come on up, guys. Give them a round of applause. I open a new tab for them.
So I guess we have to speak. We should be closest to the mic. So just stop there.
Great. So you guys, you want to grab on here real quick before...
Yes. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so if everybody remembers, we're mobile data for development. So the big idea is, can you do it? Any positive, any benefit? So what we're looking at is, really, can you do it? Are there any differences between particularly like the official data that's collected in the census? So what we're working with in terms of data, we've got the official Peruvian data set that's done face-to-face, that's a household survey. And then we've got mobile data sets coming in at 6 different periods of time. And we've got different collection methods for the mobile data. So that's just kind of an overall layout of what we're doing. And really what we're interested in seeing is, can we collect the same type of data in an accurate way via mobile as opposed to the face-to-face, which is obviously a little bit more expensive and time-consuming. So leading in?
Yeah, so we wanted to give some recommendations to the World Bank, and one of the cool things about this project is they went into the homes of 1,500 Peruvian families and asked them like 100 questions about their lives. You know, what kind of roof do you have? What is your income? How often do you work? How many hours? Things like that. And also, what they did is they did this long face-to-face interview, and then they followed up, you know, electronically via cell phone. And the only thing that they did is they published how often people responded via different mediums and under what conditions, but they didn't publish any information about the questions themselves. Like, what are these people like? How big are their families? How much do they work? There's a lot of just fascinating sociological data there that really needs to be addressed. And we had fun playing with it, but I think that would be our recommendation for further work for them.
So as far as what we actually found, is actually a really interesting, and we did focus mostly on the difference between if I can just scroll down to it, between the different types of, between the face-to-face versus the mobile. And all of the questions that we asked, so there are 7 questions that are the same between the 3 surveys that were asked 3 times, once face-to-face and then twice via mobile, or via follow-up, which was not necessarily always, it was either SMS, IVR, or CATI, which is where basically somebody calls you. And so what we found is that people are much more likely to, all the questions are in the form, did this bad thing happen to you in the last month? Right, so did somebody in your house miss school because they were sick in the last month? All 7 questions are in that form. And what we found is that people say yes about 3 times more often on the follow-up questions than on the face-to-face. And that's a really fascinating fact. So either people are underreporting in the face-to-face interview, or they're over-reporting on follow-up. There's a selection bias. Or there's an underreporting, and there's some data with physicians and addiction actually that suggests that it's probably an underreporting face-to-face as a comparison, that people sort of are ashamed to say that they lost their job in the last month if they're actually talking to a person. So this potentially means that not only could we get data more often than every few years in a very labor-intensive way by cell phone, we could actually maybe get better data than we were getting before. So super cool, and it's something we really are interested in pursuing and helping pushing the World Bank to pursue. It's super neat.
Neil covered all the really interesting bits, but the hypothesis was: are people embarrassed to say that I got robbed, or my child missed school because I couldn't pay? And so we kind of broke down how often they reported these negative things happening by how they were contacted, and that's the bottom one. I know the acronyms are obnoxious, but the SMS everyone gets, IVR is when a robot calls you on the phone, and CATI is when a person calls you on the phone. And so when a person calls you, you report you're the least likely to report that you were robbed in the last month, and you're much more likely when it's a robot or SMS.
But still a lot more than face-to-face, still almost double what people report face-to-face when they're talking to somebody on the phone, but only about half of what they report if it's an SMS or by IVR.
This is pretty good tag teaming, by the way.
So we'll go into more detail, just stop us. So just the final point, a big thank you to Amparo from Everett, from Neil, from Marta, Chris, Gisele, Tony, Derek, me, Daniel. Un abrazote grandissimo. Thank you very much. Your team was fabulous. And just to point out, 9:30 in the evening, running up to her office, getting us files. 9:30 in the morning, back here, giving hugs to everybody on the team. Amazing. Thank you.
come back up? Real quick, amazing work, incredible findings, and yes, Amparo was here from beginning to end, just an amazing advocate of this team. It's impressive. I think I went home before she did, frankly. So real quickly, questions for this team. Anybody have any thoughts? Nick?
Were you able to access any documentation about the original methodology and the justification? If you're just looking at data, you're kind of assuming some naively part of the original.
Hard-hitting question.
Yeah.
No, yeah, so it was really interesting. The World Bank had done kind of their own study with the data leading up to this, and there were things that went into the methodology behind why they were choosing what they were choosing. And so it was a mad rush to process that in time to do some of the things that we were doing. But so there is a lot of detail for that.
And we did have all of the raw surveys, so the surveys were there were many more questions, and we correlated the questions that were asked identically between the two. And then we also, with talking to Amparo, were able to get a lot of the context of sort of why and how they were chosen. So yeah, I think we had a pretty good sense of that, I think.
It's a stunning conclusion that undermines some logic.
They didn't tell us why they designed the survey how they did, if that's your question.
That's a good, I think that's a great point, and a good follow-up to say that, anything we're presenting here is a finding from a weekend of jumping into an event with people just getting up to speed. These are just sort of spark the imagination, follow on efforts from these findings, but please do not take anything here as gospel. Don't rewrite World Bank policies. Yeah, please, not that I assume anyone would. Not yet, okay? Not yet, next week.
24 more hours. And
Awesome. Oh, yes, one from Alan.
Just a comment. I think it's very interesting, and this is just Peru data, and if you think about regions of the world where saving face is a major concept, like parts of Asia, you would probably see this discrepancy even significantly larger.
So to build on that, the thing I mentioned about physicians, we know that about 1% of physicians are under active treatment for depression at any given time. But if you survey large groups of physicians anonymously, which the American Medical Association and the Canadian Medical Association have both done, then like 15% of physicians screen positive. But there's such a sort of a disincentive in the medical profession to being diagnosed with something, with a mental health condition, that there's such a shame and a cultural barrier that it doesn't it just doesn't happen, and so physicians are not treated for these things. I think it could be really analogous. It could also, caveat, could be the other direction, right? That people are over-reporting by mobile. Like you have a selection bias in favor of the people something bad has happened to are more likely to answer the follow-up surveys, because there is a pretty big attrition rate between the face-to-face and the follow-up. So it could be either, but I think the really interesting one is and the one that makes the most sense intuitively is if it's sort of the shame and the underreporting up front and being more honest in an anonymous setting.
Excellent. Thank you again, guys. And that brings up two really quick things I want to mention. One is that I love what just happened. These guys are not answering questions throughout the weekend, as very few people could answer a question in this amount of time, but raising new questions. And I'm so glad that we're gifted to have people like that who are sensitive enough to say, we found something, it could be X, Y, or Z. I'm not just going to go out and blog and say, oh my God, people are underreporting and mobile or are afraid to say something. They're actually raising those ideas so that we can go back with experts and dig into those things. I think that's great. And another quick thing I need to mention is that some backstory that you may not know is that at DataKind, we make a big effort to work with groups ahead of time before an event, because a lot of thought has to go into preparing data, a lot of thought has to go into thinking about the problems. And all the people who have been presenting up here are what we call data ambassadors. I'm going to talk to them about them a little bit later, but they've all been working for months thinking about these problems and this data. Those guys, Daniel, Neil, and Everett, showed up yesterday. This was a new project that they had never worked on before, and they jumped in, they showed leadership, that whole team did. That entire team went with Amparo's guidance to dig into this together with sight unseen. So I just want to give it up again to them for that, because that's incredible, incredible.